Okay, so hi everyone. I'm going to be presenting my research. It's titled Refining the Feature Labels of SAEs. I hope you understood the introduction earlier because I don't have the bandwidth to explain what it is right now. Uh, yeah, so my research journey started when I discovered this article. And yeah, it basically uses this website. It's called Neuronpedia, and it's a website that visualizes models for you. So you can just go on their website and just explore models if you like. And okay, so imagine you just met someone and they don't have a concept of the color red. So that's very interesting, right? But what if you also met another person and they don't have a concept of the Philippines? They don't recognize what the Philippines is. So that's very concerning, not just a curious instance. And so the article actually says that while they couldn't find a direction for the general concept of color, there was one that was close to it, but it does not activate for the color red. So here is an example of that. You can see that it basically activates for colors, yeah, not black or red. So that's interesting. Like, why does it do that? So my research question is, are there other neurons in AI models that are supposed to represent complete sets of something, but for some reason they just exclude some particular items that are supposed to be there? So this question is very interesting to me because aside from regular objects like colors or let's say kitchen utensils, this question could be very important for uh, other clothes sets such as countries or languages. So before I go on with my research, I'd like to just revisit some key terms so we could all follow along. So yeah, SAEs, they're thought to create more interpretable features in AI models, and that's basically what's used in Neuronpedia. And features, uh, how I like to think about them is they represent ideas, and closed sets are countable semantic categories, is how I define them. So they're not ambiguous. You have a particular filter for knowing which items are in the set and which are not. And lastly, activations. It represents how strongly a neuron fires for a certain input. Oh. Yeah, so here's my methodology, and here are the details of the model I used. So first, I filtered the neurons for the closed set. So here's an example of uh, an item that does not qualify for being a closed set. So I hope you can see the description. It says it's references to the fall season. So that's very subjective. Different people have different opinions on what constitutes the fall season. And here are some of the examples that falls under that. Next, once we got the set of all uh, neurons that are closed sets, I then used an LLM to generate sample sentences. So for example, we have here expressions of agreement or consensus. This is an example that we'll see later. It generated sample sentences along with the keywords that the LLM thinks that the features should be activating for. So uh I use an API for this, so don't do what I did. What basically happened is I was struggling to make it do what I wanted it to do. Like it would not follow like it would not match the keyword to the sentence. And what I did was I threatened it. So don't do what I did. But after I I did this, it basically returned like correctly 99% of the time, instead of like something like 50%. So don't do this. After that, we check for the activations of each sentence. And here's the example that we saw earlier. Um, from here, you can see that some sentences they don't activate, which is very interesting. That I'll be touching on later. So you can see that the words agree. They have strong activations. So that tells us something about what the feature is supposed to be representing. And after that, I group the neurons based on the percentage of the sample sentences that activated. So group one, all of them activated. Group two, some of them did. And group three, no samples were activated. So my hypothesis for this research question was they would all fall under group one, right? Because the sample sentences, they were generated based on the description. Um, but we'll see later how that goes. And lastly, uh, the question is, can we make a better description based on the sample sentences that did or did not activate? So the results were, here are the three groups that we saw earlier. So we can see for group one, all of them, all of the sample sentences activated. For but for the group three, none of them did. So there's actually quite a lot. And then for group two, you can see that some features only activated for 80% of the time, or 60%, or 40, or 20. So yeah, basically one fourth of them did not activate at all for the sample sentences, which is completely opposite of what we expect. So here's a sample from group one, and the description for this is references to visitors and visitation. So here are the sample sentences, and all of them activated. And yeah, when you look at the website for Neuronpedia, these are the top activations that show up. But you can also see that some of them activated for things that are not references to visitors at all. And you can see that it activates strongly for systems. So based on that, we can derive a better description than the old description that was given to it. Uh, so what I didn't mention is the old description was generated using an LLM also. And yeah, um, the new description becomes it's not only a reference to visitation, it also references systems for some reason. So for group two, only some of the uh, samples activated. So the example for this is expressions of agreement or consensus. And here's the example we saw earlier. And here are the top activations, but we can also see that it activates for some reason for forest. And based on that, I think a better and newer description would be it's a reference to agreement, consensus, and forests for some reason. And lastly, the most interesting group, in my opinion, is the group that did not activate for anything. So the description for this one is it's supposed to activate strongly for special characters or symbols. And here were the sample sentences that were generated. But when we look at the website, we can see that the positive logics of the thing, they're mostly this particular symbol. I don't know if you can see it. So yeah, you can see that it activates for this particular symbol for all of them there. and it activates for equals for some reason. So a better description would be it references to this rather than just special characters or symbols. So in conclusion, yeah, you can use SAEs as a way to uh get closer to figuring out um like features in the models. But through this, you can see that they're shown to be mostly polysemantic or too general. Like with what we saw with the previous example for the special characters, and they can be scoped down or better descriptions can be made. And for future work, I was actually supposed to create a tool that automates the process of creating better descriptions based on the sample sentences, but I ran out of time. So that's something that I want to continue in the future. So, yeah, thank you. I'm open for questions.
Yeah, so the floor is now open for questions. Anyone? Okay, please come here. So
Hello, everyone. I guess my question is somewhat simple, but like, do you have any future considerations for the extension of your work? Like, are you considering, like, if you have plans to extend it, like, do you have plans for doing a benchmark or doing other techniques in mind at the moment?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I actually have a lot of ideas on how to continue this. So I already mentioned one of them, which is I wanted to create a tool to automate the process, but I also was thinking of using other mech interp techniques such as ablation or activation steering, wherein I take samples or actually just automate them and like see what steering does when you steer it or like ablate it. So um it's like a more formalized way of ensuring that yeah, it's actually activating for that and it's not just like human pattern recognition. And my main motivation for this research was actually to figure out like why it happens. So in the article, right, it showed that there's a thing that recognizes colors but not the color red. So I wanted to know why rather than or in extension to seeing the percentage of the features or directions that actually does that. So I'm not really sure how to do that yet, but yeah, that's a main like reason for why I pursue this. But yeah, if you have any ideas on how to do that, I'd appreciate it. So thank you for the question.
yeah, so anyone else from the audience? All right, so well, yeah, I have one question. Yeah, yeah, so can we go back a bit? So yeah, for the slide about like yung symbols. So um yeah, you have to well, yeah, okay, yeah. So yeah, so for that one, right? You mentioned it also activates for equals. Yeah. So that's pretty interesting because that symbol, the tilde, right, is I know you sometimes also see it in math na it means roughly, yeah, approximately, right? So I know have um I guess what is your I know intuition about like why it's activating for this, which doesn't seem like it means equals, and also, you know, for equals, like did it also no, did you also try it for example if you're approximating stuff?
That's something I didn't do. And yeah, what you pointed out, I actually realized that right before I did the presentation, because I was searching what this symbol meant. And yeah, it's an approximation. And it's interesting that it also activates for equals. So I thought maybe rather than it being a reference to this symbol in particular, I thought maybe it refers to uh like comparing values instead. But I haven't really tried to like put a sample sentence with an equal sign, or like a not equal sign. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. Yeah, no questions. All right. Oh, so we have one more question from, oh, two more questions. Okay. Yeah, it's fine. So here's Alex.
So this isn't really going to be a question about the paper, though I think yeah, it's more of like the actual field for sparse autoencoders in general, because I'm not so familiar except for good thinking about it. But is it that the sparse autoencoders can like encode text as a chain of neurons, or like create a circuit where like let's say that neuron that talks about equals it it and then the other neuron, let's say about arrays, can be logically chained to the next part of the sentence or the next part of the text. Is that how it, like, is that possible with SAEs? Or
So I actually don't think I'm qualified to answer the question because I don't understand SAEs completely myself. I think you just have to wait for the next presentation, which is about SAEs, because yeah, so I'm sponsoring them, so just wait for their presentation because I don't know the technical architecture of SAEs. I just know like the general framework for what it does. So yeah.
Sorry, yeah, just to answer that question, like to describe what SAEs do, like more generally or more broadly, you can think of it like um yeah, I'll just say this analogy again, but like an MRI scan, right? When you see an MRI scan, there are certain parts that light up with each other. So you have certain parts that light up for like text recognition, certain parts that light up for like analytical thinking. What sparse autoencoders do is they look at the neurons, they cut them in between, and they're like, okay, which neurons fire with each other? And whenever groups of neurons fire with each other, they call this a feature. That means, you know, whenever things fire together, they basically mean maybe the same thing, or maybe they indicate the same meaning. So yeah, so the features that we're seeing here, they're basically just like vectors. They're vectors in the matrix, and they're basically just indicating there are parts of the model that fire together for this particular feature. And how we generated the description is um we looked at the samples of text where these sets of neurons fire, and we're like, okay, what's in common? Which words are having a large activation? Tapos from this set of like words that the model like activates on for that particular feature, we're like, okay, so this must be in reference to its true meaning. And yeah, that's a high level view of how SEs work. No, it's like it's what fires together, like what parts of the model fire together. They're not related to like how we think of things. So we're basically looking at the analogies. We're looking at an alien's brain. We're looking at what things fire together, and then we're like, okay, maybe this means something. Maybe it's correlated to what it's trying to say, and yeah, that's how we get SAE features. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have one more question from the audience, right? So please.
Okay. So by your description, in your descriptions, the model outputted some words that may seem unrelated to the descriptions. Is it possible that um the data set the model was trained on contains a lot of sentences that have both words, or parang it created some sort of association between, say, agreement and, was it forest or system? Forest, yeah.
I think that could be possible because I mentioned that one of the reasons I pursued this research question was to understand why it happens. And I've thought about it, and I think that's certainly possible. Um, yeah, I'd actually like to look into that and verify myself, but as I said, I don't really have the knowledge to, yeah, to figure out if that's what it actually does. So it's an interesting question. So thank you. Yeah.